And with that, it's time to start the debate. Determined by a coin toss, Representative Dorman will be first with his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, and it's certainly a pleasure to be here tonight. I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank Governor Fallin for agreeing to this debate. Certainly want to thank OSU, the League of Women Voters, and OETA for conducting this forum. And also want to thank the viewers like you watching on television tonight and participating in this important part of our democracy. I grew up in a small town called Rush Springs, out in western Oklahoma, had many great opportunities. My dad was disabled in a truck accident when I was 4 years old. My mom worked hard to make sure that we had opportunities. She's here with us tonight. She made sure that I studied hard and had every opportunity. That allowed me to come to college right here at Oklahoma State. I worked hard through school, and my first job right out of college was working in the mailroom at the House of Representatives. So yes, I am that person that started in the mailroom and has worked my way up to here. I also had the opportunity to run 12 years ago and serve my home district, District 65, and I've been proud to work for them over the past 12 years. During that period of time, watching leaders and participating in the discussion at the Capitol, I saw real leaders working, trying to shape policies that would benefit Oklahomans, that would make their lives better. And unfortunately, I do not feel we have seen that over the last 4 years. We have seen problems, especially with our education system, where teachers have not received a pay raise, where students have had trauma placed on them through third grade high-stakes tests, the A through F grading system, and cuts in education to the tune of $200 million for common education, $100 million for higher education. We simply must invest in the future, and we need real leadership that will work across the aisle to do that. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. Governor Fallin, you have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight, back on my alma mater campus at OSU. I grew up in Tecumseh, Oklahoma, and it was always a lot of fun to go to school here. And I appreciate our panelists, the League of Women Voters, and certainly all the students that are here tonight, along with OETA, for hosting this debate. And thank you, Representative Dorman, for being here also. We're both very proud Oklahoma State graduates, so it's great to be here. I want to just remind our Oklahoma family where we were 4 years ago when I ran for governor. 4 years ago, I came into office during a very tough time. We'd gone through a national recession. Oklahoma had a 7% unemployment rate. Our state was literally broke. We only had $2.03 in our bank account, our savings account. And we had tens of thousands of Oklahomans that were unemployed and out of work. We had a budget deficit of $500 million in our state budget. And so I told the voters of Oklahoma that I was going to deliver on conservative common sense principles, low taxes, fair rules and regulations, fiscal responsibility and budgeting, and focusing on creating a high-skilled, educated workforce for our state. We prioritized our spending. We closed that budget gap, and we did lower taxes. We prioritized our spending on education, on infrastructure, on health, human services, on public safety. And then I also promised voters that I was going to stand up to Washington, D.C. and federal bureaucrats whenever they step upon Oklahoma states' rights or ever do things that would create bad policy upon our state. And we did those things. So the results have been that now we have the 4th fastest growing economy in the nation. We've created over 103,000 new jobs in our state. The unemployment rate has dropped to 4.7%, and we have $500 million in the state savings account, which meant that I was able to put more money towards education and higher education during my 4 years as governor of the state of Oklahoma. So our challenge moving ahead is to continue the forward momentum of Oklahoma. And I ask you for your vote.
Thank you, Governor. We now transition to journalist panel questions. The first question will come from Rachel Hubbard from KOSU and is directed to Representative Dorman.
Representative Dorman and Governor Fallin, as we've talked to people about this debate, many people have complained about public education, everything from teacher salaries to standards. Governor Henry Bellman led the charge in 1990 for a master plan for Oklahoma's education system, House Bill 1017. Since that plan ended in 1998, more than 80 new laws have been enacted to reform schools, all without such a master plan. Do you think the state should have a master plan for education? And if so, how can we hold you accountable for your leadership in developing one?
Thank you for that question, and that certainly is the most important issue in this campaign. As we've traveled around the state visiting with Oklahomans, they are greatly concerned about the future generation, about those students in the classrooms right now. Over the past 4 years, we've seen policies passed, such as A through F grading, which unfairly grades our school system, and we have seen poorer school districts that have been penalized because of a lack of funding, because of a lack of increase in per pupil allocations. We've seen over $200 million cut out of per pupil allocations over the last 4 years, with a little bump this year just playing election year politics. That is unfortunate. We've also seen our schools implement third grade high stakes tests that simply put trauma on these poor little students. We should instead be putting these funds into remediation and tutoring to help these students keep up with their classmates and learn. That's the most important thing. We must provide these students the opportunity to learn. We must provide the resources for teachers. We have seen almost 900 teacher positions filled through an emergency certification this year because we do not see enough teachers going into the field. We have not invested in the future, and when we do not provide that investment, we will not see the opportunities for the future. We hear a lot about a great economy, but that will not continue if we do not have the proper resources and provide for that future generation.
Thank you. Governor Fallin, you have 90 seconds.
Well, thank you. There is nothing more important to Oklahoma's future than creating a highly skilled, educated workforce, and education is critical to Oklahoma's future prosperity. But the first thing we had to do when I took office as governor of Oklahoma is to bring prosperity back into Oklahoma. As I mentioned, we had a $500 million budget shortfall. We'd gone through a national recession. We were broke. And I promised I was going to create jobs so we could fund education. So I've been very proud over the last 4 years that we've been able to increase funding for education by the tune of $150 million new dollars for K through 12 education, plus also adding new money for higher education and also career tech in our state. But along with new funding, you must also have high academic standards. You must also have accountability. You must inspect what you expect. And that's why I set standards as one of our top priorities, that we would make sure that our schools are accomplishing its goal, and that is to make sure our children are getting a high-quality education. That's why we did sign Ending Social Promotion in the state of Oklahoma, making sure that our children can read at grade appropriate levels. That's why we also passed A through F to make sure that our parents in our communities know how their schools are performing, and if they're falling down the job, to be able to repair that and be able to help them do better, because our children deserve nothing less than a quality education in Oklahoma.
Thank you. The next panel question will come from Dick Pryor, Deputy Director, Managing Editor of OETA TV, and his question will be directed to Governor Fallin.
Governor, Representative, good evening. Oklahoma ranks 7th among all states in reliance on federal funds. More than 43 cents of every dollar the state spends comes from the federal government. Which federal dollars do you think are permissible to accept and which ones are not? Please explain the rationale behind your answers.
Well, there are a lot of federal funds that come into the state budget, as we all know, in the state of Oklahoma. And of course, Oklahoma taxpayers pay those taxes that go into the federal government. That's the way our democracy in the United States was set up. But there are times that we receive federal funds that have strings attached, or federal funds that might actually hurt Oklahoma or might set us back on some of the policies that we're looking at. And I'll give you a couple of ideas and examples of that. You know, one of the things we worked very hard on over the years, and I had the chance to serve in Congress on the Transportation Committee, was to make sure that Oklahoma got its fair share of funding back on the gas taxes that we sent to Washington so we could build better roads and bridges. We've been able to reduce our deficient bridges by 34% in the state of Oklahoma because we've been able to get more of that funding back for our state. Certainly Medicaid dollars, Medicare dollars, always important to the state of Oklahoma, Social Security dollars, education dollars, making sure that we have control over education standards and policy, something I think is important.
Thank you very much. Representative Dorman, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you very much. We've seen quite a bit of hypocrisy on this, on selecting certain federal funds, which are good, but then demonizing other programs. Money that's been paid in by Oklahomans through their taxpayer dollars, going to Washington, D.C. bureaucrats, that money should come back for Oklahomans to use. when we talked about transportation funding, obviously we need to work hard to make sure that money comes back because we've seen the quality of the roads and the problems we're facing with bridges. The governor just indicated that Medicaid was a good program. Well, then why not look at the Medicaid expansion? Why not look at those funds that would address 180,000 Oklahomans, many of them children, those ones working? That fund would address those individuals who are the working poor, those ones earning minimum wage jobs. It is important to make sure that the money that goes into Washington, D.C. come back for the use of our citizens. We also lost the flexibility with education because the governor's regents refused to make the No Child Left Behind waiver by addressing those as workforce ready. And then the board members that the governor appoints to the State Department of Education also refused to certify those as workforce ready. That hurt our public schools. The policies that we've seen with the Fallon administration and Janet Barisi have damaged Oklahoma, and we must turn that around.
Thank you. The next panelist question will come from Rick Green, Capitol Bureau Chief of the Oklahoman and News OK, and his question will be directed to Representative Dorman.
Oklahoma fares poorly on a number of measures of public health, including preventable hospitalizations, drug overdose deaths, obesity, violent crime, and children in poverty. Hundreds of thousands of people lack medical coverage. What will you do to help with these problems?
As I pointed out with my last answer, I do believe that we must maximize the opportunity to bring those federal funds Oklahomans have paid into Washington, D.C. We must bring those back for the use for Oklahomans. The Oklahoma Hospital Association has shown numbers that say between 12 and 36 hospitals across the state of Oklahoma will either shut down or reduce services significantly. That means people could travel up to 40, 45 miles for the birth of a child or for some emergency situation. We must work to keep those hospitals open. I am tired of Oklahoma being at the bottom of the list. Often we've heard, at least there's Mississippi. But in too many cases, that's not the case any longer. We must work to move Oklahoma up the charts. We must improve the quality of life for Oklahomans. We must make sure they have access to health care. We must work to expand opportunities through telemedicine to make sure that technology is located in those rural areas so Oklahomans will have access to the best quality health care. We must work to make sure that those doctors are located all over the state. We must provide opportunities for those students to become doctors. David Boren summed it up perfectly. Whenever he became the president of the University of Oklahoma, we had seen about 50% of the state funds going to education through covering the cost for students to be in school. When he became the president, it was at 33%. Today, it's in the teens, and specialty program like nursing, 7%. That's unacceptable.
Thank you. Governor?
Would you mind to repeat your question?
Yes, Oklahoma fares poorly on a number of measures of public health, including preventable hospitalizations, drug overdose deaths, obesity, violent crime, and children in poverty. Hundreds of thousands of people lack medical coverage. What will you do to help with these problems?
That's a very good question. First of all, health is very important to Oklahoma's future because if we don't have a healthy workforce, if we don't have healthy families, it hurts Oklahoma. It hurts our prosperity as a state. And one of the things we've done during my administration is to launch a comprehensive statewide health improvement plan. And I'm happy to report that Oklahoma has actually improved its health rankings in many different areas. We've reduced our amount of smoking and tobacco products by a great amount. We've reduced our amount of children who die, child mortality. We've reduced those rates. We've also worked very hard to focus on obesity. You might have seen just last week, Kevin Durant, our most valuable player and Thunder team, was able to join me in launching a statewide program to talk to our school children in the state of Oklahoma about health and wellness and exercise and nutrition, which we think is very important. As far as Medicaid expansion in our state, we certainly are very concerned about those who don't have health care services or access to health care, and certainly very concerned about health insurance premium costs. But we also know that if we were to expand Obamacare in the state of Oklahoma and Medicaid, that it would cost our state over $1 billion, which would take away from education, infrastructure, corrections, or other topics like that. As far as rural hospitals, we've seen the Obama administration and the Affordable Health Care Plan remove a huge amount of money from Medicare, which goes directly to our rural hospitals. And by the way, your time clock stopped there.
We are working on that
that
right now to make sure that that works, but you hit your time mark perfectly. Thank you. The next question will be coming from Rachel Hubbard, and that question will be, once again, directed to Governor Fallin.
Oklahoma's income tax brings in $3 out of every $8 of state revenue. But we've seen incremental tax cuts over the last several years and more specialized tax credits. At the same time, fees for public services, such as drivers and hunting licenses, have increased by close to $200 million. Some might call this a bait and switch. It's a politically unpopular issue, but what would you do to reform Oklahoma's tax code?
Well, one of the things I think we should do in the state of Oklahoma is to have one session that's dedicated to the state budget and have the next session dedicated to legislative policy. What I find as governor of the state of Oklahoma is that there are a lot of people who are new to the legislature that don't quite understand all the different finances of the state. It's complicated, it's difficult to deal with, and I think that would help us all be able to focus on the finances of the state. You know, one of the things I've advocated is that we continue to lower our income tax in the state of Oklahoma, something that Representative Dorman has said is meaningless and is a waste of time. But I do believe in letting people keep more of their hard-earned money. It helps stimulate the economy, it helps our families, it helps us be able to balance between being able to provide for state government, but yet also generate a strong, vibrant economy that creates jobs. As far as the fees and the different taxes that are added upon different things, one of the things I asked the legislature to do was look at all of our exemptions, to look at the exemptions, to look at the fees. If they don't create wealth, if they don't create jobs, if they don't stimulate economic growth in our state, then we need to look at possibly removing some of those things. And I actually proposed that a couple of years ago. We do have a lot of exemptions. We do have a lot of great incentives that create jobs in our state, but we also have some that I think we need to look at to make sure they're really doing what they're intended to do.
Thank you. Representative Dorman, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. And I certainly agree with the governor. I'm glad that she's followed my leadership on this, as I called for that session several years ago to do the budget session one year and then switch over to doing a policy session, because not only do we need to put the time into the budget, but we also must be thoughtful on the policies. When legislators rush through policies, we often have to create new bills to fix the problems of the past. And that is something we require more thought and insight from our legislators. Now, we must look at the tax structure. There is no doubt about that. Oklahoma's tax structure is antiquated. We look at municipalities. They must operate on sales tax. Schools operate on property taxes. Our state, we operate on the income tax, as you said. We must look at this structure and make sure it's fair. We've seen what's happened in the past with an oil bust. We're riding high. The governor has been the beneficiary of a wonderful time in Oklahoma that allows for individuals to reap those benefits from the energy production. But with every boom, there will be a bust. And we must work to prepare for that. We have made sure that the state savings account, our rainy day fund, is solidified right now. That has been through legislative action to make sure we've been responsible. But I do want to point out some of the tax policies that have been championed by my opponent. This session, she promoted a property tax increase to help build storm shelters in schools, against the views of many Oklahomans. She also promoted an income tax change that would have raised income taxes on middle-class Oklahomans. We must be thoughtful. We must spend time in a legislative session to review those.
Thank you. The next question will come from Dick Pryor and will be directed to Representative Dorman.
Most state agencies received a cut in their appropriation this year. For many, it was just the latest in a series of cuts over the last several years. Since 2007, the percentage of Oklahoma's total tax collections that go to the state's main operating account, the General Revenue Fund, has shrunk from 55% to 48%. What do you say to people who have seen services they and their family need eliminated or reduced, or their jobs cut, while the state is spending increasing amounts of tax dollars on dedicated spending, including tax credits and incentives?
We've seen a growth in our state budget. In fact, my opponent signed the legislation that put into effect the largest budget in state history with $7.2 billion. But we also faced a $180 million shortfall. That was a problem because we had to find a way to cut those services. The Department of Corrections right now is operating at 53% staff levels. The governor's chief legal counsel said those employees are fine. That is not correct. Those employees are in danger every single day when they go to work because the staffing levels are dangerously low. We've seen the problem with our teachers by not providing a pay raise and giving them the opportunity to earn a decent living. We must go through and make sure that these agencies have the proper resources. Now, I'm in favor of audits. I think we should go through and save funds through auditing the agencies. I'm certainly not in favor of consolidating the Arts Council, the Historical Society, and the Scenic Rivers Commission under the Department of Tourism, as was promoted by my opponent on the first day of session. We must make sure the resources are in place. We must be responsible with our taxpayer dollars. That is how we will get more money into our education system. We must provide those resources to make sure the teachers have the resources in the classroom, to make sure the employees are safe, whatever their job might be, and make sure that we have the best roads possible to drive on in Oklahoma.
Thank you. Governor, you have 90 seconds.
Well, we certainly did see a difference in the revenue that we thought would be coming in this year because so much money has been taken off the top through legislation that the legislature has passed, and it is true that we only get 48 cents of every $1 for taxpayers, which makes it very hard for a governor or even legislators to be able to prioritize our spending on things like education, transportation, corrections, health, and public safety. And that's one of the things I've been actually talking to the legislature about and pushing them to change, is that we need to do a thorough review of all the exemptions and the money off the top, off that $1 that comes in that we only get the 48 cents on, so we can prioritize that money and put it back into the things that will really make a difference in the state of Oklahoma to grow our economy and to improve education and, frankly, to improve the quality of life. Now, I will tell you that Representative Dorman did vote against agency consolidation. One of the things that I promised the people of Oklahoma was I was going to make government more efficient, more effective, and I was going to find ways to eliminate government waste. We did consolidate 75 different agency boards and commissions out of 600. Yes, we did do that to save taxpayers money so we could put it back into education. And by the way, I did put $150 million into education, whereas he proposed this year only putting in the franchise tax, which would put in $35 million into education, so twice the amount of what he proposed. We also did do an audit of the Department of Corrections, and we have added new money to the Department of Corrections.
And I apologize, Governor. It appears we're having some technical difficulties with our time clock, so
me too.
If we can all bear with it, I apologize.
But at least it's red. I appreciate that.
Well, so we hit our time mark. The next question will be coming from Rick Green and will be directed to Governor Fallin.
Oklahoma incarcerates more of its population than most states in the country, yet the crime rate remains high. Oklahoma began a justice reform initiative, but didn't fund it largely or adhere to its findings. Do you have a plan for reducing the state's high incarceration rate?
Absolutely. And if you read the Day Oklahoman, you would see it. But I know you do. But actually we did. We do support the Justice Reinvestment Act. One of the things I did this past year was to bring on a Harvard fellow who spent a long time. In fact, he spent over 500 hours looking at the Justice Reinvestment Act in our prison systems, along with the audit that I asked our state auditor to do of the spending that we do in corrections. One of the things I think we have to do, and I've always advocated, I've been very consistent on this, is that we have to be smart on crime and tough on crime. And we certainly have seen some conditions just recently that reinforce why we want to be tough on crime. But the Justice Reinvestment Act gives us a way forward to help step down people who are coming out of our corrections system. It also helps with being able to diagnose what the true issue is with the inmate, whether they're a criminal, whether they have a mental health issue, whether they have a substance abuse issue. That's why you saw me put $17 million new dollars into mental health and substance abuse services in the state. It's also why you've also seen me push on drug courts so that we could help those who have a substance abuse issue so that we can, once again, keep the prisoners who are in our prison system that are a threat to society in the prison system versus those who may have a substance abuse problem or maybe have a mental health issue, that we can steer them to the mental health department. So those are some of the things that we've been working on. As far as the funding itself goes, you know, we did put $1 million new into corrections this year. We're looking forward to working on the Justice Reinvestment Act.
Thank you. Representative Dorman, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you very much. And my opponents memory is a little hazy because the Justice Reinvestment Initiative was passed by Speaker Chris Steele, a Republican from her home area originally, and that was a promise that we would reinvest the dollars in the public sector to make sure that what was wasted in corrections would instead be turned around to public safety. That was passed, but less than a year after that, after meeting with private prison industry and officials, many of those reforms were repealed by a new speaker. That was unacceptable. I have worked on this issue for years. In fact, I want to personally thank my brother-in-law, Eddie Coast. He used to be the head of prison ministries for the Southern Baptist Convention. We have had many discussions on this. We spend too much money locking up people that we're mad at and not locking up the people who are truly the criminals, the ones that we're afraid of. We must work to do a better job. We must provide opportunities for rehabilitation. We have gotten away from the term corrections in the Department of Corrections because we're truly not correcting behavior. The third highest rate of incarceration for Oklahomans, basically for anyone in the nation. The #1 incarceration rate for women. These numbers are unacceptable. We do not have the worst people in the country, so why are we locking up the most people? We must do a better job, and all of that goes back to education. We must provide the funds for education. When we invest early, we won't have to worry about the corrections. It's a crime that we spend twice as much on convicts than we do on per-pupil allocations in our schools.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Rachel Hubbard, and it will be directed to Representative Dorman.
In the past few years, laws on issues ranging from tax credits to abortion to the repeal of Common Core have had their constitutionality challenged. The Attorney General's office must then pay staff to defend these laws, which some argue costs the state money that could be spent on other things. What is the role of the governor in vetting the constitutionality of laws that you sign?
Certainly, any bills that come across my desk as governor, the #1 thing I will look at is the constitutionality of that language. I want to make sure that taxpayer dollars are spent wisely. We cannot continue to waste dollars on unnecessary lawsuits. We've seen that happen time and time again. In fact, I asked the Attorney General's office how much has been spent on lawsuits, and they would not give me that figure. Anytime a legislator asks for those figures who serves on the Appropriations Committee, that's wrong. We should receive those numbers so we can do a better job. Let me point out a problem we saw with the budget this year. We were given the budget bill, a $7.2 billion budget bill, at 10 a.m. in the morning on the next to last Friday of the session. The first vote on that bill was at 12:30, 2.5 hours later. When our legislators do not have the proper time to review the budget, we certainly cannot see the best type of budget for Oklahoma. We must be responsible with those taxpayer dollars. We must make sure that the legislation that passes is constitutional. And again, it goes back to that thorough review for 1 year. That is the way we will see better legislation and better opportunities for Oklahomans. That money that is currently being wasted on lawsuits, it should go back into the classrooms. It should go for teachers for a pay raise. It should go to protect benefits. And it certainly should go to help those students to receive those resources to achieve their highest potential.
Thank you, Governor Fallin. You have 90 seconds.
Well, certainly, anytime we review a law that is passed by the legislature, we give it a thorough review with our legal counsel, our legal team, as well does the legislative staff and their legal team when they review it too. So I don't think there's ever anyone in the legislature that passes a bill or even a bill that's signed by me that we believe is unconstitutional. But there are challenges. There always has been challenges to laws that are passed and signed by the legislature and signed by the governor. Now, we certainly don't want to waste taxpayer money on challenges to lawsuits and constitutionality of the laws themselves. There are some laws that people challenge that are ruled that they are constitutional, that they do reflect the law. There are some that are ruled the other way. That's the way the system works. It's a check and balance system. But we certainly don't want to waste taxpayer money on lawsuits themselves, and we certainly want to make sure that the laws we pass are constitutional. And I agree with Representative Dorman that we do want to put more money towards education. We do want to put more money towards lowering our taxes, which he opposes, but I'm for lowering taxes in the state of Oklahoma. We do want to put more money towards our state services that make a difference, like mental health and substance abuse, and focusing on prison reform and focusing on helping our highway patrolmen. We were able to give them a raise this year, able to give corrections, more money this year. Those are all important topics for our states. Being able to put more money into roads and bridges. That's where we need to be focusing our limited resources in our state.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Dick Pryor, and it will be directed to Governor Fallin.
Governor, following the deadly tornadoes of 2013, including the Moore tornado that killed 7 elementary school students, each of you pushed plans to fund building of storm shelters and safe rooms in schools. Neither of the proposals passed. If you are elected, what will you propose in the next legislative session to address the issue of school safety and security, and why do you think your plan is the best idea?
Well, let me just first of all say that the Moore tornadoes and all the tornadoes that we had throughout the community, in fact, all the different devastating things we've had over the last 4 years has been very disheartening for the state of Oklahoma. You know, I was there on the ground during the Moore tornadoes. I was there within a couple of hours after it hit to walk through the devastation, to see the schools, the Plaza Tower, to know that we had loss of life during that time, to work with the first responders. And I just want to give a shout out to all the first responders and all the charities that worked so very hard to help people who were suffering at such a great loss during that time. But certainly we want to make sure that our children are safe in their schools. I did propose that we would allow schools and local control of local school districts and local citizens to be able to have the opportunity to vote for a bond if they chose to be able to put in safe rooms or some other safety precautions. Actually, Representative Dorman did propose that a couple of years ago, the same position when he talked about he wanting to increase property taxes. I wouldn't be increasing property taxes. The voters would be voting on that. That's what's called local control. This year, he proposed that we spend $500 million on a bond issue. That money would have to come from somewhere out of the state budget. So both of us care deeply about children, about safety, about storm shelters. And to answer your question, I will continue to push that we have that local control where local communities can decide what they need in their individual communities.
Thank you. Representative Dorman, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you very much. And this issue is probably what led me to this decision to run for governor more than anything else. Working with family members and more, Mickey and Danny, Nicole and Stacy and the other parents, through trying to get an initiative passed to build storm shelters in schools and to improve school security. We must look at the different options. We found a better solution than raising taxes. We found that we could use the franchise tax and use that to back up the bonds, use that money and match with FEMA dollars, and that would have provided the $2 billion necessary to build storm shelters in the schools and improve school security against a terrorist activity. But that met opposition from the governor and others of her party because they did not want to see a bond issue go through. But we did pass a bond issue to repair the Capitol building. So I do see a flip-flop there, a flaw in the decision-making policy and the rationale when we chose that the Capitol building was more important to fix with a bond issue than the public schools where our kids and grandkids go. We must do what we can to ensure that these schools are adequate and safe and provide the security. The governor championed a property tax. You cannot slice it any other direction. She was pushing a bill that would increase property taxes locally. We have provisions in the Constitution that protect against tax increases. We will not see legislation go through that the legislature solely will push a tax increase. So her saying that I've been for tax increases is simply flawed logic.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Rick Green, and it will be directed to Representative Dorman.
What is Oklahoma's biggest environmental problem, and what is your approach to solving it?
We must work with our different conservation districts to provide the necessary resources. I was an employee of the conservation districts back in high school, and that gave me a great opportunity to learn about the problems we face. The dams that we have in Oklahoma were built for a 50-year life, but it's been well over 70 years since they've been fixed. So we must provide the proper infrastructure, and we must work to make sure that those federal dollars that Oklahomans pay in for their taxes come back for use here so we do not have to raise taxes. We should not ask our citizens to put in more. We have seen too many tax credits issued. In fact, the numbers and the estimates say that we almost have $7 billion in tax credits for businesses with corporate welfare. We must reassess those and use that money to be put back in to make sure we have proper conservation programs. We must work with our farmers. We see program after program that helps other sectors of business, but we have been leaving our farmers behind. We must work to make sure that they have the proper programs for conservation and can raise those crops. We must certainly work on developing better water policies for our state. We need real leadership that is in touch with the needs of the citizens, whether it be in Idabel or in Guyman or Altus or Miami, all four corners, all points in between. We need leadership that will sit down with those folks at the coffee shop, listen to their ideas, and bring them back to the Capitol, be a true voice, and have the vision to pass policies that will work for Oklahomans. And we must do this in a bipartisan manner, working with Republicans and Democrats alike.
Governor Fallin, you have 90 seconds.
Before I answer that question, just let me comment on the previous question and answer that Representative Dorman just answered. First of all, he said that he wanted to take the franchise tax and use that to pay for bond issues for storm shelters, but he also said he wanted to take the franchise tax and put that towards education funding, which is $35 million, which once again is half of what I've already put into education funding for our state. And by the way, Rush Springs did have a ballot issue to be able to raise their local bond issues in their community to put in storm shelters. So I appreciate his local community actually putting that on the ballot. It failed by 2 points. It had to get a 60% margin, got 58. But at least we have schools that are already currently doing that in the state. Back to the environment issue, let me just say, I think one of the biggest issues facing Oklahoma right now has been the drought and water. And water is important to so many important sectors of our economy, whether it's agriculture, whether it's the energy sector, whether it's tourism and recreation, whether it's residential drinking water. We've initiated a statewide water implementation plan for the state for water conservation. We all want to be good stewards of our land and our water and our air. We've implemented a piece of legislation that I signed that said that we will not use any more water in 2060 than what we utilize today so we can conserve our water. And just last week and a half ago, I hosted a drought forum in Oklahoma that focused on ways that we can repurpose and reuse water and to work with our communities and our industries to do that.
Thank you very much. Well, it's time now to hear from Oklahoma State University students. Our journalist panel members will each read a question that was submitted by students in the audience. The first question will be read by Rachel Hubbard and will be directed to Governor Fallin.
This question is from Catherine Tipton, a junior at Oklahoma State University. She asks, do you agree or disagree that there is a connection between fracking and the increase in earthquakes? If you do, what do you intend to do about it?
Catherine, that's a great question, and thank you once again for going to Oklahoma State University. It's a great university. First of all, I think Oklahomans have been concerned about earthquakes and what is causing them. We've had a long history in the state of Oklahoma of earthquakes. We have a lot of scientists. We have the U.S. Geological Survey. We have other experts from our universities, Oklahoma State, University of Oklahoma. We have industry sector people who are looking at what is the cause of the earthquakes. Are they man-made or are they just a natural course of nature itself? And so the information and the determination has been unclear at this point. But the one thing we do know in the state is that we have to make sure that we get the information correct, that it's dealt with facts, research, and that's why I started a Governor's Coordinating Council that takes the U.S. Geological Survey, our scientists, our researchers at our major universities, and even the private sector to join together to gather the data, gather the facts, gather the information, and to make sure that we understand whether it is man-made or whether it is caused by something else. Also, the Corporation Commission has also been working with us. In fact, they have a system that deals with disposal wells in the energy sector that gives them a red light if they think it may be a disposal well on a fault line in the state, or a yellow light if there's a possibility it could cause an earthquake, or certainly a red light if it could cause an earthquake. So we've been dealing with many regulatory agencies to make sure we're addressing this issue.
Thank you. Representative?
I certainly want to also thank you for that question, because that is on the minds of many Oklahomans. There was a meeting that happened in Edmond just about a month ago to discuss that topic, because Oklahomans are frustrated as we have seen an increase in earthquakes in our state with no reason. The science has been done. We just need action taken. We must make sure that the industries are applying safe practices. We need real leadership that's in touch that will deal with these issues. The thousands of dollars of damage that have occurred to individuals' homes with what we saw at St. Gregory's with a spire toppling, one of the early earthquakes. This is unacceptable. We need action and we need leadership that will address this problem. We must work together as a bipartisan legislature and executive branch to come up with those solutions, working with the Corporation Commission also, but holding the industry accountable and making sure that the practices are safe, whether it be fracking, whether it be injection wells. We need to see the results, and we need to do something about that. We must act responsibly, and we must make sure that the citizens and their property and their safety is of the utmost and highest consideration.
Very good. The next student question will be read by Dick Pryor, and it will be directed to Representative Dorman.
This question is from Shane Jemison, who is a senior at Oklahoma State University. If elected or re-elected, what will you do to ensure that college students not only stay in Oklahoma after graduating, but to also create jobs for our college graduates?
Thank you for that great question, and that is of a growing concern. As we've seen with the education field, too many in that program are leaving our state to go to greener pastures across the lines where they're paid $15,000 more starting off. That's unacceptable. We must work to improve the situation we face in our schools. We must provide a teacher pay raise. We must protect their benefits. Those teachers that have worked hard their entire lives, they deserve that benefit. And we must have responsible leadership to pursue a COLA, that cost of living increase, to provide for those retired teachers. Too many teachers are struggling right now. When they become retired, they have to go find a second job. That's not right. We must work to provide those opportunities for all businesses. About 80% of the businesses in Oklahoma are small businesses, but often they're overlooked. Instead of chasing the brass ring and trying to bring in a big corporation, we should work with those small businesses. My Department of Commerce will work with the different regions. They will work with the career techs to provide job training. We have one of the best career tech systems in the nation. In fact, it's the only agency that's headquartered outside of Oklahoma City. It's right here in Stillwater. We must work to make sure that the job training is top-notch, and that will help us improve those small businesses and eventually build those small businesses into larger businesses. We must provide those opportunities, and I think that includes paying a living wage to Oklahomans.
Thank you. Governor, you have 90 seconds.
Well, first of all, Shane, we're looking forward to you graduating and staying in the state of Oklahoma. And you know, that's been one of my very top goals, is to create the right type of economy, creating the right kinds of jobs, good paying jobs that will help you achieve the American dream. You know, as a mother of six, my husband and I have 6 children between us, we want to make sure that all of our children can stay in the state of Oklahoma and find a high paying, good job so they can even do better than what Wade and I have done as adults. And so we have been able to create over 102,000 new net jobs in the state of Oklahoma. In fact, our per capita income in the state of Oklahoma is one of the top rising income levels. It's double the national average in the increase in our income that we have. So you're going to be able to find a good paying job. We also have the 4th fastest GDP growth, gross domestic product growth in the nation, making Oklahoma one of the hottest markets to locate. And just this week I saw an article that said that we're ranked 7th in the nation for young professionals between the age of 20 and 24 to locate in Oklahoma. And then don't forget about that low cost of living in our state. We're ranked as one of the top states in the nation for having a low cost of living. That's what we've been working towards, is making sure that you'll be able to graduate from college, be able to find a good paying job, be able to stay here and to be a good contributor to Oklahoma's economy. And then another thing I just want to close with, we've been working on college completion, and I'm very proud of our America Works College Completion Program, which we've increased the number of college graduates.
Thank you. The final student question will be read by Rick Green, and it will be directed to Governor Fallin.
Bailey Underwood, OSU freshman. In light of recent natural disasters and school shootings, how do each of you plan on updating emergency plans for Oklahoma's public school system?
Well, Bailey, that's a great question. We certainly want to make sure that all facilities in the state of Oklahoma, especially public buildings and public schools, are safe. You know, I just recently this week received the NRA endorsement, which I'm very proud of. I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment of the state of Oklahoma, and certainly we want to make sure that we do everything we can to create safe rooms or safe facilities at our schools. That's why I propose allowing local school districts to look at their local needs to be able to decide if they need to enhance their school safety facilities in their schools and be able to make those decisions themselves, how much they can afford, what they need to do in the schools. And that's something that's very, very important. I certainly work with our Highway Patrol, our Homeland Security, and making sure that we keep the public aware of any potential threats. We certainly had a very tragic episode that happened in the state of Oklahoma this week that shook us down to our very foundation. And we want to do everything that we can to make sure that Oklahoma is aware that whenever there is a threat, that we address those concerns very quickly and that we keep our public informed. But, you know, I guess to get back to say that, you know, we're doing everything we can to make sure that we have an emergency plan in place, and we certainly have initiated that many times. I was actually Lieutenant Governor when we had our federal Murrah building that was bombed back many, many years ago. I was there during a very difficult time and moment in Oklahoma's history, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we're safe as citizens and protect our Second Amendment rights.
Thank you very much. Representative Dorman, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you very much. I will say sometimes talk is cheap on this, and we need real leadership. We need action that will respond to this. 4 years ago, when Janet Barisi took over in the State Department of Education, one of the programs that she eliminated right off the bat was the emergency hotline to call in for issues that might be facing your school. We saw when the council met just a couple of years ago, that was one of the first suggestions to reinstitute. Now, the board that my opponent appointed has backed up all of these policies that we've seen that go through the school policies that have hurt our schools. We must see real action and real leadership that will sit down. I championed that after the school shootings a year ago. We had a meeting in my hometown of Rush Springs. I invited school superintendents and school professionals and teachers and parents from all over the state to discuss what we could do better. In Bartlesville, we almost saw a tragedy similar to what we saw in Sandy Hook. But that was averted because students acted the right way. They reported a situation. We must encourage these students to look for these situations and work with their school administrators. I certainly want to see more resource officers in the schools, partnerships between the municipalities and the school districts to have that mentor position, that law enforcement officer in the schools to help provide that safety and security. We must work to make sure our teachers have the right resources. We cannot continue these cuts.
Thank you very much. And that concludes the question portion of the debate. We will now hear closing remarks, and according to the pre-debate coin toss, Representative Dorman will go first. Representative, you have 2 minutes.
Well, again, I want to say it's a great pleasure to be here tonight. I had many great memories here in this student union and on this campus, and it's hard to believe that I'm up here now having this opportunity. I want to work to make sure that we have the right voice and the right vision at our state capitol. We need a leader who is in touch with the needs of Oklahomans, someone who will work across the party lines. As I've traveled around this state, I've had the opportunity to visit with my Democratic and Republican colleagues, both sides, taking me around, introducing me to their constituents and voters. This has been an amazing experience as I've traveled around the state, learning about the needs of Oklahomans, and I want to have the opportunity to serve you as the next governor of the great state of Oklahoma. We need real leadership that will not simply talk about the issues, but take action and work in a bipartisan manner, not veto bills, but sit down and work with the legislators to make sure those policies are right when they come across the desk the first time. Certainly to make sure they're constitutional, but to address the needs all around Oklahoma, to make sure that water is protected and not given to Texas with a memorandum of understanding like what we saw, to not shut down the necessary programs like Norse and SORC that help those Oklahomans in the most dire of situations. We must make sure that we provide proper funding for mental health issues. My opponent says she increased funding, but the reality is there was a $21 million cut to mental health programs. We must see real leadership, and certainly, going back to education, we must have a champion for those students, a champion that will eliminate these ridiculous tests, put appropriate standards in, not just follow the party line with Washington, D.C. bureaucrats, but listen to the Oklahoma experts and do what's needed to help provide the best opportunities for our students to achieve their highest potential. I humbly ask for your vote on November 4th. Thank you.
Thank you. Governor Fallon, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here tonight, and it certainly is a wonderful opportunity to be able to speak to the Oklahoma voters. So first of all, just ask for your vote and your support for my reelection for governor of the state, and just to thank you for the great opportunity and pleasure to be able to serve the great state. You know, I promised the voters of Oklahoma several things when I took office. First of all, that I was going to work on creating jobs and building a better, brighter future for Oklahoma families, to help our small businesses be able to grow and prosper, to be able to turn the budget around and to create new wealth, new revenue for our state, to be able to prioritize our spending and to put more money back into education, which is exactly what we did, to be able to put more money back into roads and bridges, to be able to reform our corrections system, and to do things like the Justice Reinvestment Act, which is what we've been working on, to be able to stand up to Washington, D.C. whenever Washington does things that takes away our individual rights or steps upon our liberties or takes away our state rights. I'm the only candidate in the race that's done that. I'm the only candidate that stood up and voted against Obamacare, that stood up and said no to a failed policy. You know, President Obama said that if you liked your health care plan, you could keep it. He promised that your insurance premiums wouldn't go up. He promised that if you liked your doctor, you could keep it. None of that has come true. So my opponent now wants to take more of Obamacare and put it into the state of Oklahoma through Medicaid expansion. There are ways that we can help the state with improving our health care without adopting a big government takeover of our health care system that is already making other states go broke. It's estimated to cost the state of Oklahoma over $1 billion if we were to implement Medicaid expansion into our state. I've been endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Businesses. I've been endorsed by the pro-life groups. I've been endorsed by the National Rifle Association. We stood up for the things that are important to the values of Oklahomans. I haven't been endorsed by MoveOn.org. I haven't brought in some of those big national groups into the state. I'm the only conservative in this race, and I will continue to lead Oklahoma with conservative principles.
Thank you. And that concludes the debate. I would like to thank Governor Mary Fallon and State Representative Joe Dorman for a spirited debate. I would also like to thank the journalist panel of Rachel Hubbard from KOSU Radio, Dick Pryor from OETA TV, and Rick Green from the Capitol Bureau Chief of the Oklahoman and News OK. I would also like to thank the partnership of OETA TV, the Oklahoma League of Women Voters, and Oklahoma State University for putting on this debate. It was a good debate. Be sure to vote on November 4th. Good night.